Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. My name is Lucy, and I'm the Senior Programs and Training Coordinator at Children and Young People with Disability Australia, or CYDA. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a white woman with brown, curly hair. I'm wearing a purple silvery top, and in the background behind me is CYDA's logo and our organization colors. Before we jump ahead, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm calling in from the lands of the Ghana people. And I'd also like to acknowledge that Saida are based in Ngam, on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and Woiwurrung language group. In Adelaide, Tanzania, Ghana land, there's the phrase Nina Mani. It means, are you good? And it's the standard phrase that if you've spent time here on Ghana land, you'll hear when people are giving welcomes or acknowledgements. It's, as I said, a standard introduction and just a piece of language that I wanted to share with you all today. When someone says Nina Mani, the traditional response is Mani Ai, which means I am good. So thank you all for joining, and I hope all of you will be able to say Mani Ai. I hope that you're all doing well today. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. CIDA is a systemic advocacy organization and disability representative organization advocating for the rights of children and young people 0 to 25 with disability, as well as their family and carers. Today's event will be talking about recruitment, retention, and well-being in the workplace. This event will be opened in a moment by Dr. Jenny Crosby from the Centre for Inclusive Employment once I finish housekeeping. So, for the rest of the event, we'll then go into a panel discussion where we'll hear from a great range of panelists. You'll get to hear a little bit about CIDA's work in the inclusive employment space and the learnings that we've had from our time working in this space over the past 5 years. After that, we'll have a question and answer section where people can let us know what they want to hear from our panel. We're recording today's event to share it online afterwards for folk who are unable to make it. And we have a range of SATA staff available to help you today. Sajed is providing tech support and will be able to help if you're having if you've got any questions or are having tech issues. Julia will be managing our chat and will be there to answer any questions you might have more broadly. If you need captions, you can turn them on by either pressing the captions button at the bottom of your screen or pressing the More button with the three dots, and then pressing the Show Captions from there. We'll have our interpreters, Jamila and Dave, spotlighted throughout the event for people who need, but if you need multi-pin access, just reach out to us so that we can arrange that for you. You can change your view using the View button in the top right so that you can ensure that you've got access to see all the panelists or the current spotlighted panelists, whichever is more appropriate for you and better for your accessibility. We also have a Safety Wellbeing Officer, Sarah, who's available if you need any support, if this brings up anything that might be challenging or that you otherwise want to reflect on. So today we'll be hearing from Dr. Jenny Crosby, Dr. Lisa Folks, Councillor Andrew Rouse, Carla Rawlins, and Matt Lewis from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. These leaders in their fields will be sharing their reflections on the importance of workplace inclusion, the advice that they found beneficial and that they'd give to others now that they've been on those journeys. But to set the scene and give us that broad understanding of why inclusive employment is deeply important, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jenny Crosby, the director from the Centre of Inclusive Employment. She's worked in a variety of disability employment related roles, and her recent PhD topic was about school to work transitions for young people with intellectual disability. She's passionate about ensuring that all young people have access to meaningful work and to the activities that get young people on the pathway to work. I'll hand to you now, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Lucy, for that lovely introduction. My visual description is that I'm a middle-aged person with white hair, and I'm wearing a black top today, and I'm sitting in front of a purple background, which is the Centre for Inclusive Employment's colours. So thank you to Lucy and the CIDA team for inviting me to provide the opening address today. As Lucy said, I've been involved in supporting people with disability to achieve their employment aspirations for many years. And despite this significant investment and effort, too many people are still not able to achieve their career goals, and this needs to change. It's important to ensure that our workplaces are accessible. Accessible workplaces support wellbeing and a more inclusive society. So how do we ensure that all Australians have access to meaningful work and the benefits that it can bring? In March 2025, the Australian Government Department of Social Services funded this new Centre for Inclusive Employment, and it was in response to the need to improve employment opportunities for people with disability. The work of the centre will focus on raising awareness about the employment support needs of people with disability. The centre will run for 2.5 further years through to June 2028, and it's our intention that the centre will become a one-stop shop where people can get access to all the relevant information about what supports people to be in employment. We're hoping that the centre will be used by young people themselves and their families and supporters, by employers, by service providers, by government and others who have an interest in improving employment outcomes for people with disability. We have centred the Centre for Inclusive Employment's work around making sure that the information is equally accessible to all. So we want young people to have the same access to information that everybody else has. One thing we know about young people is that for many with disability, expectations about what they can achieve are low, and we need to change that. But how do we do that? So on our website, you'll find a whole section that covers off on laying the foundations to work, and I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. So for starters, ensuring that young people have access to early career development supports and the types of activities that help all young people work out what they're good at and what they like, which is the very essence of career development, is critical. We know that far too many young people with disability miss out on those early career opportunities, and that sets them on a path to not being engaged in work later in life. Of course, some young people need extra scaffolding to access these early career activities, and so it's vital that this scaffolding is in place for all young people who need it. Universal design and workplace modifications can support these activities, and there will be more discussion about these in the webinar today. And of course, we need employers to come on board to support young people with disability as they embark on their career journey. And I know that we have Dr. Lisa Folks on the panel today, and she's been heavily engaged in working with employers around young people and how we can provide opportunities to young people. So it's going to be great to hear her thoughts today. There are lots of ways employers can get involved, including by offering work tasters and work experience, by mentoring young people and expanding their social capital, and through internships and graduate programs, as well as by being open to redesigning job roles so that they are a good fit for a broader range of people. We know that many job roles are designed in not a very scientific way. They iterate over time and the job roles become quite fixed. However, they're not fixed. And this is an area that we need to really focus attention on. And I hope Lisa will talk about that today, about how we can really think about the way work is designed so that young people with disabilities can be part of the solution to the labour market shortages we have today. A good question to ask ourselves is whether the recruitment systems that were designed over a century ago are still fit for purpose today. How can they be redesigned to be more inclusive and accessible and enable employers to access greater talent? We know, again, that interviews and written applications don't bring out the best in many young people, and their talents can remain hidden. So how do we encourage employers to think about the way that they recruit and onboard young people with disabilities so that their talents can really shine through. Today's webinar will explore these and many other topics related to inclusive employment. Our new online hub, which is at www.centrefoриnclusiveemployment.au, I know that's being put into the chat for you, has lots of resources to help employers and young people, and particularly employers who want to commit to building a more inclusive workforce. I hope that many employers who are joining today will go onto the website and access the resources and take one step following the webinar today to ensure that they're contributing to building inclusive workplaces for young people in Australia. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And after the webinar, to help you take that one step, everyone, we will be sharing a range of resources that have been highlighted and recommended by the Centre. And that'll be some of the many options and ways of taking that step to support inclusive employment that you'll learn about through today's session. Of course, when we're talking about inclusive employment, we're also talking about recruitment, we're talking about retention, and we're talking about well-being. Because ultimately, we know that the things that support young people with disability in a workplace are broadly things that support the entire workforce. One of SADA's earliest projects in the employment space was our Dream Employment Network. This network saw over 500 people, including over 200 young people with disability and over 300 employers and people in the workforce who wanted to learn about and develop their understanding of how to strengthen their workplace's inclusion processes. As we were co-designing that network, what we heard from young people with disability is that they wanted open communication and clarity throughout recruitment processes. They wanted to be informed when they were unsuccessful when applying for roles. They wanted access information available on websites so that they knew what kind of opportunity they were exploring and whether it'd be right for them. They wanted organizations to have diversity inclusion statements and diversity and action plans, and for those to be online, easy to find and access. They wanted employers to communicate what their jobs and interviews would involve and how best to prepare for them. And they wanted employees to demonstrate a willingness to learn and respond to feedback. And when we think about psychological safety, when we think about what makes a safe workplace, what makes a workplace people want to participate in, that availability of information, that willingness to learn and respond to feedback from organizations as a whole, from their managers, from their structures, policies is designed in a way that is responsive and well-meaning. It might just be because I'm still a younger person myself at 26 years old, but I think those are things that make a good workplace for everyone. And there are things that I know benefit any organization that's looking to strengthen their recruitment processes and that's looking to improve well-being in the workplace and retention of the staff who make their organization happen and make the work happen. There's something called the curb cut effect, which highlights that changes made for people with disability do benefit the whole workforce. Examples like that, of course, the curb itself is just a way which letting people with wheelchairs and strollers and other devices to support their mobility also means that people who have prams, people who might be temporarily injured, people who are just learning how to ride bikes and want to go on the footpath while they're building their confidence, for example, have the opportunity to also use the curb and get this support. When you're designing roles and policies in your organization and considering your organization structure with these potential effects in mind, what you're practicing is something called universal design. It's considering what the potential benefits and unintended consequences of making an adjustment might be, so that you can ensure that not only the policy itself, but the structure you're putting that policy within is going to benefit everyone. When we talk about strengthening workplaces, we talk about accessibility and inclusion because we know that universal design and the curb cut effect will kick in when you're making these steps. Because we know, again, that what benefits people with disability, what benefits young people with disability, those are opportunities that are beneficial for everyone. To let you hear a little bit more about that and about the ways that changes you make can benefit the entire workforce, I'd like to hand over in just a moment to Jason to lead our panel. Jason McCurry is our programs manager. He's led several projects centering young people with disability in employment during his 5 years at CIDA, including the Dream Employment Network and the Employer Innovation Lab. He has lived experience of disability and mental illness, living with Tourette's, anxiety, and OCD. He's passionate about making sure marginalized groups are provided opportunities to participate in decision-making on the key issues important to their lives. Over to you, Jace.
Jason speaking. Thank you so much, Lucy. Hi, everyone. Thanks to our speakers so far, Lucy and Jenny, and thanks to our interpreters here today, Jamila and Gus, and also our captioner, Sharon. Thank you for being here. We are lucky to have a great panel here today, folks. Before I go into it, as Lucy said, I'm the programs manager at CIDA, which is Children and Young People with Disability Australia's acronym. I use he, him pronouns, and as a brief visual description of myself, I've got short brown hair, a short brown beard, and today I'm wearing a blue button-up shirt with a colourful background behind me. As I said, we've got an amazing panelist today for you, and I'm just going to read out their bios, just mentioning a few of their career and professional and personal highlights. So up first, we have Dr. Lisa Folkes. Lisa leads Social Ventures Australia's work on employment. She's spent 20 years working on programs that are aimed at addressing labour market exclusion. At SVA, this work focuses on what employers can do to ensure that their practices create opportunities and not obstacles. Welcome, Lisa. We're also joined by Councillor Andrew Rouse, who was elected to the Melbourne City Council in November 2024. Councillor Rouse is the Portfolio Head for Innovation and Education, Portfolio Deputy for City Economy and Business, and one of the Council's representatives on the Design Excellence Advisory Committee, championing the people and project that shape Melbourne as a city of possibility. Andrew completed a degree in mechanical engineering at the University of Melbourne before specialising in entrepreneurship at the Wade Institute. He went on to lead programs at the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre, helping researchers and founders turn big ideas into real-world impact. Andrew is focused on building a city that inspires creativity, backs bold ideas, and creates opportunity for all Melburnians. Welcome, Councillor Rouse. We're also joined by Carla Rawlins. Carla is an accessibility and inclusion specialist with lived experience in rare and undiagnosed diseases and expertise in disability employment and workplace adjustments. Carla is committed to removing barriers and fostering equitable, supportive environments in organisational settings. She's also completing a Master of Disability Inclusion, and it's great to have you with us today, Carla. One of Carla's colleagues, Matt Lewis, is also with us today. Matt Lewis is someone living with an invisible disability and proudly identifying as part of the LGBTQIA+ community. Inclusion is at the heart of everything Matt does. He strives to create workplaces where everyone feels valued and empowered to bring their whole selves to work. Through support systems, progressive policies, streamlined processes, and ongoing education, he works to remove barriers and foster belonging. Matt's focus is on enabling staff to embrace their unique identities and thrive in an environment that celebrates diversity. Inclusion isn't just a goal, it's a commitment to equity and access for all. Welcome, Matt. It's great to have you here as well. And also joining our panel is Lucy. As Lucy shared, she is CIDA's Senior Programs and Training Coordinator. She's a 26-year-old non-binary trans person with a psychosocial disability and chronic fatigue. She's driven by her lived experience and her authentic connections to the disability and LGBTQI+ communities. It's great to have you on board as well, Lucy. Up first in this panel, we've got some set questions that we'll go through with the speakers, and then we will move later in the session to guest questions from the audience. So if you've got any questions, feel free to send them throughout, and we'll save them up until the end. So welcome, folks. It is great to have you all here. Lisa, I'll start with you. Lisa, working with CIDA on the Employer Innovation Lab gave you an opportunity to see that many of the changes that you support employers to make, both in the lab and also the Fair Chance Initiative, which focuses on social class and background, also benefit people with disability in the workplace more broadly. Are there any reflections on this that you would like to share with us today?
Yeah, thanks, Jace. My name's Lisa, folks. I'm a middle-aged woman with brown hair, wearing glasses, and have a black shirt on today. And my background says Social Ventures Australia Innovators for Good. Look, I need to tell you the story of how the Employer Innovation Lab that we worked with CIDA on came about, because it tells you a bit about this question. You know, we have been running programs to encourage large employers to create great jobs for young people who don't get the opportunity to go to university, many of whom live in low-income areas and are facing unemployment and underemployment. And as we ran those programs, what we found is many of the young people we spoke to also identified as having a disability. So when we thought about that, we thought, well, actually, this is clearly part of the picture that we are trying to address about access to quality jobs. And we approached CIDA to work with us on a joint program where we could co-design and lead a program with employers. So for me, I think that we knew that disability was one of the things alongside low income background, but also this changing labour market that makes it much harder for young people who don't get educational opportunities to succeed. We saw that was part of the picture. But one of the things that I guess we didn't know was how much we might need to adapt the content for this focus. And what we discovered working with CIDA was that while there's a tendency to see approaching disability employment as a sort of a technical issue, like we would have employers who'd say, oh, can you give us a list of disabilities and a list of adjustments that can be made? And what we realised, in the important lens that our work that CIDA brought to the conversation with employers, is that actually this is about being open, about being flexible, about recognising that all forms of exclusion, financial exclusion, educational exclusion, have an impact on how you show up to the workplace, how you present to an interview, whether you can cope with an interview, whether you actually understand what's even in the job ad. So it was a really important lesson, I guess, in universal design, in understanding that difference is everywhere, and issues like poverty, exclusion, educational exclusion affect all sorts of people in how they present.
Jason speaking. Thanks, Lisa, for kicking us off. Councillor Rouse, I'll come to you next. A lot of your work has been about innovation. This question is, people can be committed to maintaining business as usual practices and can be hesitant to make change, whether that's big or small. Are there any words of advice you can share to encourage organisations to step away from business as usual to strengthen their workforces?
Thank you very much, Jason. And much like yourself, I've got short brown hair and a brownie red beard, wearing a blue shirt today, and sitting in my office here in Town Hall in front of a colourful painting of the Queen Vic Market. Great question. And you're absolutely right that often one of the biggest issues we see with businesses here in the City of Melbourne, and also in my previous roles working with a lot of startups, is we get so focused on the issues in front of us and the day-to-day issues of running a small business, that we're sometimes unable to step back a bit and think a bit more strategically, and think a bit more long plan as well. A lot of the organizations we see here in the city are small businesses, small enterprises that perhaps aren't set up in the same way to be able to consider some of these longer term considerations. So we do a lot of work with our small business community here to provide them with resources and help in that process as well. So we run workshops to help small businesses here in the city. We've also got online through our website a series of different checklists that people can use to make sure that whether they're running events or making their workplace as accessible as possible, they've got considerations for things they might not have thought of as well. So our aim is to make things like this as simple as possible, so that the excuse of, well, I'm just too busy, getting customers through my door, is not as impactful as it might have been. The other really important part that we like to speak to with our small businesses is making sure there's alignment between these two things. And the biggest issue for a lot of the small businesses is getting customers through the door and keeping the lights on. So if we can help them to understand that diversity and inclusion in their workforce is actually really important because there's diversity in their customer base, having that alignment between those two things is really helpful for helping the business, rather than seeing this as a process to go through.
Thanks, Councillor Rouse, for that, and thanks also for sharing the resources. I think someone in the chat will share those checklists for events and other workplace checklists as well in the chat for everyone. Matt, I'll come to you next. With over 5,000 staff, RMIT is a large organisation with a very diverse workforce, and we know that large organisations can be resistant to change at times. So quite different framing here to the question for Councillor Rouse in terms of small and medium-sized organisations. Could you please tell us about the processes you've used to make change happen in such a large organisation?
Yeah, hi Jason, thank you for that. Hi everyone, my name is Matt Lewis, pronouns are he, him. I'm the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity and Access Manager in the People and Culture team at RMIT University in Naarm. I have a lived experience with disability as well, and mental health, and also care and responsibilities for folks with disability too. And there's a quick visual description. I'm a 36-year-old white male, buzz cut head, black glasses, short brown facial hair, and I'm wearing a black t-shirt today with a Speed Racer logo, if anyone remembers that cartoon. Bit of a flashback for some, I think. And it's a really great question there, Jason. And I'm really stoked to hear that Jenny and Lucy spoke so much about universal design in the introduction to today's session. And that's exactly what we do at RMIT and where we focus our attention. So that can be very difficult to implement in an organisation as large as ours. But one way that we've done that is through developing a tool which centres universal design and intersectionality. And we call that the Sustainability and Equity Evaluation Tool, or SEE tool for an acronym. This tool essentially is a conversation, really, that asks users if let's say they've got a policy that they're developing. We run a little workshop with them and we go through a whole bunch of questions to consider how will that policy have an impact on the folks that are reading the policy, the folks that are impacted by the policy, and then also what the flow-on effects of the policy might be. And these questions touch on accessibility, disability, gender, First Nations, cultural inclusion, but also environmental impacts as well, and governance for those that like governance. So it's a bit of a catch-all conversation to really support people in having those conversations at the outset, and also being able to sometimes retrospectively amend policies as well that might have been in place for some time. In a university the size of ours, we need to make things as easy as possible because a lot of people are busy, and similar to what you were saying, Andrew, we're trying to remove those instances where folks can say didn't have the support to be able to consider that impact. So we do what we can through that tool to have that conversation at the outset.
Jason speaking. Thank you, Matt. The next question is for Lucy. So Lucy, up until this point in the webinar, you've been acting as the host, but as also a 26-year-old, you're considered a young person with disability. Could you please tell us why inclusive employment practices are something you're personally passionate about?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So I guess I just want to share a bit of my lived experience in regards to that, to kind of set the scene there. So up until up until I started at Cider just over 2 years ago now, I spent about a year not unemployed but quite underemployed. And this was largely due to really a combination of organizations having just business as usual policies that they hadn't considered the ramifications of and whether they were fit for purpose. Um, so just to give some context, because of my disabilities, I cannot drive. And because of the need to manage energy levels and fatigue, I require the ability to work flexibly from home and to have the ability to adjust my working hours when needed, to make up later in the week or fortnight, to let me manage energy levels on a day-to-day basis. All of these mean that a lot of organizations, despite looking for someone with my skill set, looking for someone to join them, to coordinate programs, typically programs working with marginalized cohorts. So these are organizations working on projects that have an overlap with and are working to support people with the same lived experience as I have policies set up for their staffing, which mean that unfortunately we're not always actually fully inclusive for the people who need it. For me, this meant that with multiple organizations, I was offered casual roles, contractor positions, and other opportunities that meant that despite the fact that ultimately I was bringing a skill set that they were looking for and did want to hire, because of my disability and because of a lack of flexibility in their policies, they weren't able to bring me on into a meaningful role. This meant that for quite some time, I was only working between 10 and 15 hours a week. And to manage through that time, I needed to um, use the entirety of the savings I built up across my 5 years before that in the workforce. Additionally, it meant that I had actually ended up um, really feeling quite hopeless, I suppose, in regards to what my future would look like. Because ultimately, I was running into situations where, because of things I need that are inherent to me, I was being told that I wasn't the right person to do things that I had the skills for and was deeply passionate about and really felt were my life purpose. All because, to put it one way, because I was disabled. To put it more realistically, because of the fact that so many organizations don't have the policies set up to let them bring on board the best people and to let them bring on board people who do have the skills to actually meet their needs and support them. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of on a personal level why inclusive employment is something I'm so passionate about. I'll hand back to you, Jace.
Jason speaking. Thanks, Lucy, for sharing that and sharing your lived experience with us. And obviously, um, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that you've had those experiences, but it's really important that you and people like yourself are sharing your lived experiences to guide employers and those in the room today. We need to learn from those lived experiences and improve on behalf of the community. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for the work you're doing in this space. We'll move to a couple more questions, and then we'll get into some of CIDR's training content. Uh, Lisa, in the Employer Innovation Lab that we touched on earlier, participating organisation receives CIDR's training about recruitment and management of employees with disability. How did this training support organisations in the wider lab process?
Yeah, look, I think when we think about inclusive employment, sometimes we think a lot about getting people into the organisation, but not enough about what happens to them once they're in the organisation. And we know that, for example, many people with disability experience discrimination in the workplace, including from co-workers, but also that many people with disability get stuck in low income, lower level jobs. So we need to pay attention to that. One of the things that we do in the lab workshops themselves is we make sure that people from employer organisations sit down with young people, and in the case of the lab we did with CIDA, with young people with disability, and have a conversation and talk with them. And that is one of the most powerful things that happens in the lab process, because it requires people to challenge their assumptions. They always learn something. The employers always come out of those sessions saying, that was the bit that, I learned so much from that. It forced them to have a conversation with someone they may have been othering by thinking was challenging or have assumptions about. So what CIDA's training does is it gives employers the opportunity to actually equip co-workers and supervisors with some of the tools they need to make sure that once someone with disability comes into the workplace, they can support them effectively, and perhaps most importantly, understand how to have productive conversations, because it's not like adjustments or workplace settling in is a set and forget. It's an ongoing process. We work with our co-workers, we come to work, we deal with office politics. We need to equip workplaces to succeed. But I also just want to say, particularly about CIDA's training, the wonderful thing about what CIDA does is that employers, workers, managers, supervisors get to see young people identifying themselves as a person with a disability, talking, advocating, advising, and also creating a safe space. So one of the most important things that CIDA did through the lab, but also through their training, is they gave people the sense of security that they could ask questions, that they could, they couldn't, that if they just used the wrong word, that wouldn't be a disaster. That, it was about good intentions and open conversations. And what we know about this space is that fear and uncertainty is one of the enemies of getting change. So what CIDA's training in particular does is open up a safe space for people to act, because we need desperately people to act, not just think about acting.
Jason speaking. Thanks, Lisa. Such an important point there about why changes aren't made are often is that fear or uncertainty or fear of getting it wrong, and bringing it back to intention and learning. Obviously, you make mistakes along the way. That's actually a good thing. You can acknowledge that and learn from there. But keeping that as intentions as the focus is really important to bring about change within the organisation and systemic change as well. Carla, we'll go to you next. What specific changes to RMIT's recruitment process have improved accessibility, and how have these changes flowed through to outcomes like quality of hire and diversity of hires?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Carla, and my personal pronouns are she, her. I'm the Workplace Adjustment Officer at RMIT. I also live with disability, and I'm a carer for two neurodiverse children. A visual description of myself: I'm in my 40s. I have brown hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing glasses and a black jumper, and today I'm working from my small home office. In regards, Jason, to your question, one of the most significant steps at RMIT was becoming a disability confident recruiter through the Australian Disability Network. In fact, RMIT was the first university in Australia to achieve this status, and we have maintained it since 2020. And this involved a complete review of our talent acquisition process with our people team, HR, undertaking specialist trainings through ADN to really build capacity and confidence in attracting and supporting candidates with disability from the very start. As inclusion is one of the core values at RMIT, we also offer internally a self-paced online module called Inclusive Hiring. And when a talent acquisition advisor starts, they always go through that program to ensure consistency. As part of this work, we embedded accessible recruitment practices across all stages of hiring. Examples include offering adjustments at every step, including interviews, providing accessible documents and templates for reasonable adjustments, and creating overall clearer and simple processes within Workday following its implementation in 2021. From 2022 to 2024, these improvements continued with incremental system enhancements to remove barriers and improve candidate experience. More recently, almost now nearly a year ago, RMIT also entered a formal partnership with Job Access, which is the Australian government's national hub for workplace accessibility. And Job Access provided us with tailored recommendations that we've implemented, including disability awareness training, really good resources for hiring managers, and also a really strong engagement with disability employment services or DES providers through information sessions explaining what roles we have and what we look for in candidates. And we also, in addition to that, were able to advertise, promote some positions through DES providers. And all these changes have really had a positive impact and a strong flow-on effect. By embedding the accessible design into recruitment, we've broadened our talent pipeline and attracted candidates who may not have previously seen RMIT as an inclusive employer. As an example, one of the DES providers that partners with Job Access is Vision Australia, and we have in fact seen an increase in the number of candidates with vision impairment applying. And based on that, myself, in collaboration with another colleague, who is the digital accessibility lead, created a low vision and blindness training for our staff, and there has been a very strong interest in that training. So I believe that all these changes haven't just increased diversity, but they've clearly improved our quality of hire, because when candidates feel welcome and supported from the beginning, it allows them to show their full capabilities during recruitment and integrate more successfully once appointed. And this also reinforced by our broader cultural work happening at RMIT, including strengthening psychological safety, access and inclusion, and our idea framework.
Jason speaking. Thank you, Carla, for that overview. And yeah, thank you. And congratulations to all of you, the panelists, for the work you and your organizations are doing to make more inclusive workplaces. A range of tools, trainings, and resources out there. And I think that the importance of partnerships and kind of working with other organisations, whether that be formal or informal partnerships. We'll keep moving through to the next section now, and I guess talk about one of those training offerings. And Lucy, I'll bring it back to you now. Obviously, today we're excited to launch CIDR's new training offerings to the public. And yeah, keen to talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll come back at the end for a Q&A with the panelists again. So I'll hand it over to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Chase. Just as we are going to be heading into the Q&A soon, I'll just encourage people to put their questions into the chat, or even better, make them using the Q&A function now so that we can see them and make sure we get to them. I also know that we've got some great questions banked, because with such an awesome panel, I got a bit overexcited and put so many potential questions in. So we've got plenty to cover and here to continue learning. So I guess I just want to kind of cover some of, I think, the most valuable parts of the training as I go through and show you some of the slides. So ultimately, something I'm deeply proud of with our trainings is that when we designed these trainings, building off of all of the work we've done in policy and advocacy, all of the work we've previously done in employment to support young people with disability, we put all of that together into an initial training package and ran a testing session with some young people with disability. These are people who are folk who have gone through our programs to build up their advocacy skills, to build up their confidence. So they're a really clued in bunch about what lived experience means to them and what it means systemically and how to advocate for that and represent it. And showing that group the trainings we'd put together, and really from them getting yes and answers, getting, we love this, we'd want to see more of that, getting, this is a really great representation of everything we've been talking about, was really encouraging, because these are people who are not at all afraid to tell us when something's wrong, because they know that's what we've brought them in for and that's what we've trained them up to do. So it was just a really positive moment for me as I look into that. Now, when it comes to what our training offers, we go through 3 core sections with different modules in each of them, depending on which audience we're delivering a training for. We start off by building a basic understanding of disability, really centering down to a rights-based lens. As an advocacy organization, we know that, of course, we continue to work with and support and build up young people with disability. But we know that ultimately some of the challenges that young people with disability face when they're looking for employment are systems level challenges. So we make sure that organizations understand disability from a rights-based lens, because that sets them up to interrogate their systems. Once they have that understanding, we then talk about how to transition from a rights-based understanding of disability to using person-centered language, recognizing that people have rights, and that even just in the ways we talk and the ways we support each other, we can use that to build an understanding, to show that we have an understanding of rights, and to show people that ultimately any engagement is mutual. It's to create partnerships, and it's to think about ways we can benefit each other. This leads to meaningful reflection and confidence, and being able to talk with people with a disability, to ask questions, to not be afraid of failure like Lisa was talking about, to realize that a lot of the changes aren't necessarily as big as people think, and that, as Andrew was talking about, you can get there step by step, and that it really is just that process as opposed to an expectation that you can snap your fingers and have everything there. We'll then, from that, move into talking about actual ways to build accessibility. We'll get into talking about all different changes people can make, whether that is policies, whether that's how they're engaging, whether that's built environment, whatever's most relevant to the organization and to the cohort we're presenting to. And then we encourage people to reflect because we know that ultimately it's one thing to have the right words in front of you, but really it's most important to be able to actually see how those play out in practice and to think about situations you've been in previously to know what you'd want to change and what you'd want to do differently next time to ensure that you can be inclusive. Of course, being presented by at least one young person with disability in all of our trainings means that you get an opportunity to try that language out in person, to ask questions, to have those discussions, to really build capacity, because we create an environment where people know that there's no wrong answers. A go-to line that people hear in any training with me is that I've been doing this for a long time and living it for longer. So if you can ask something I haven't heard before, no matter how silly it is, you get a gold star. Because ultimately it's something where without that safety, without that ability to ask questions, you're not going to learn. So we know how important it is to cultivate that environment. And knowing that we'll be jumping into the Q&A soon to hear back from our panelists, I just want to finish up by mentioning that training is not the only way to learn and develop at all. Obviously, it's something we'd recommend, but there's resources like the ones we created, co-designed through the Dream Network, that we're incredibly proud of, that are available free online for people to access, that there will be a link for in the chat, and that you'll be able to access again, along with so many other great resources that have been highlighted by the Center for Inclusive Employment. Those including language guides, conversation guides to support discussions around meeting access needs, around how to access and make use of the Employment Assistance Fund so that organizations can actually fund the changes they need to make their workplace accessible for their employers, guides to develop disability action plans and inclusion plans, and resources about the roles of managers, HR, people and culture, of front-facing workers, and ultimately resources that can support anyone to be better at creating inclusive, accessible, and safe environments. So that was a bit of an abridged run-through of our trainings. So thank you for being patient with me as I was jumping through that. And I'll hand back to Jason now to bring us into our Q&A.
Jason speaking. Thanks, Lucy. Such important work you're doing, and yeah, we'll just share the link in the chat again for our new training offerings there. As you said, really recommend folks check it out and inquire about training from those with lived experience. Hopefully it can really benefit your organizations moving forward. We obviously bring so many awesome speakers together. It's always going to be tricky to have time in a 1 hour webinar to cover everything, but thank you for your time so far. We do have a couple of minutes left for some audience Q&A. So we invite some questions via the chat or via the Q&A function if you'd like to use that. And we'll invite the panelists to answer those. So audience members, if you've been thinking about anything either before or during the webinar, please let us know now. And Councillor Rouse, I'll ask you the first one. Could you tell us about how accessibility and inclusion processes are being supported and incentivised by local governments?
Yeah, really great question, Jason. One of the positive and I guess also the scary things about being in local government is everything that we do is very visible to the people. We've got a meeting tonight and anyone in Melbourne can come in, ask us questions, hold us to account. So we've got our Inclusive Melbourne strategy, which is a big 10-year strategy document that speaks a lot about all these sorts of things. And a strategy document is great. We've got to make sure we actually do and accomplish these things. So we've currently got our our 2-year Inclusive Melbourne Action Plan as well, which goes through those things in more detail and how we actually deliver them in small increments, which is really, really important. And it just happens that part of this one of those big focuses for us as an organisation for these 2 years is making sure that we're updating and reviewing all of our hiring practices, making sure that where we communicate and onboard people is as inclusive and fit for purpose as it needs to be as well. So one of those important things is by doing that in a public fashion, it means that we can demonstrate and show that to the world and to all of the businesses here within Melbourne. And we can kind of go through that in a public fashion, for better or for worse. And that means other organisations can look at us and look at the steps and the processes that we're going through, look at our policy documents as well. And it means that when they're going through those processes, they are able to do that without having to start from the beginning, whether they be businesses in Melbourne or whether that means other local government organisations here within Victoria. They can look at us and use us as a starting point rather than starting from zero.
Jason speaking. Thank you, Councillor. And yeah, really important. I think that's one of the biggest things often, especially for larger scale organisations, the big plans and strategies, but how do we practically get there? Really important. Thank you. A few questions in the chat. Mohammed, thank you for the session and about receiving the slides. Feel free to reach out to us through the website there. There's an inquire button and we'll post our contact details in the chat, and we can definitely talk through those slides and the other things that are included in the training. There's a good question here I've just got from MPD. This is an open question for anyone on the panel. If your organisation is new to inclusive design, where do you suggest starting? Anyone like to take that one on?
Jason, Matt speaking here. I'm happy to jump in unless
Thanks,
someone else wants to. Lisa, I think your mic went off as well, so maybe we can tag team on this one. It's a really great question. For us, it was a lot about understanding what universal design actually meant in an education context, and really bedding down what it meant to us and sort of how we wanted to, I guess, demonstrate impact should we implement sort of universal design within everything that we do. The great thing about Australia is there are a lot of resources within Australia that can support you in universal design and sort of understanding how to embed it in your organisation. One is the Centre for Inclusive Design, and I might pop that in the chat for the hosts to put into the chat as well. But that was a really great resource that we used to sort of wrap our heads around what universal design meant, how we could pitch it, I suppose, to the wider university, and then get some ideas about how we can implement that as well. So it's a bit of a journey, but it's one worthwhile taking for sure.
Thanks, Matt. Lisa, do you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to say, and this is coming at it from, in a sense, the very simple version of it. One of the most important things that we do in our work, and including through the lab, is ask people. So we always start with talking with young people, in this case with disability, or the people who you're trying to think about, whether they're inside your organisation, and always advocate for talking to people already in your organisation, but also some of those outside your organisation, and start to understand what are the things that inhibit them getting in or getting on, having a good experience. I think that one of the other mantras we have, so apart from listening to people and creating as many opportunities as possible, the other thing is not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think that we can often get trapped in big architecture and solving things and not wanting to get it wrong. But acting, we already know, the evidence tells us, if once you've got the experience of creating open pathways, you're going to keep doing it. So acting, I think, is a really important thing, and I really commend CIDR's work and CIDR as a partner in starting to act in this area.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Matt. And we've got some awesome questions coming in. Unfortunately, we are at times. So what we'll do is we'll try and we've noted down these questions. Thanks our tech and chat moderators for noting down these questions, and we'll be providing a post-event follow-up email to all registered participants along with the recording link. So if we didn't get to answer your question today, we apologise. But we'll try and cover them in the email. Clara, there's a great question there about intersectionality, and intersectionality is such an important thing that we didn't get to focus on much today, but is definitely included in the training. So definitely wanted to read out that important point. I'll hand it over to Lucy now to wrap up our session. Apologies, we are going to run a couple of moments over, but it is important we finish. So if you do need to go, thank you for joining us. I'll hand it over to Lucy to wrap us up in the next couple of minutes. Thanks, Lucy.
No worries. Thank you, Jason. A huge thank you to our panel and for all the great questions and engagement we've had in the chat. I'm going to see some really great positive feedback there and really thoughtful questions. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank everyone. I also want to thank our interpreters and captioner for ensuring everyone's able to fully participate in this session. So just in case anyone needs, as a reminder, we do have our safety and wellbeing officer available who you can reach out to if this question did bring up anything that was challenging. We do have membership available for CIDA. As a member, you might soon be able to, might be able to access some discounts for the training. We'll also have some great opportunities available for you to learn more about what CIDA is doing, and as a member, you'll be the first to know about opportunities to engage with us. I look forward to seeing all of you take the next steps to strengthen your organization's use of universal design, whether that's through looking into resources, trainings, or the great bodies of work out there by organizations like those of our panelists today. We want to make sure our events are as safe and inclusive as possible for everyone. So we'll be sharing a survey so that we can hear how we did and if there's anything that we can continue developing to improve on for next time. I hope you all have a great afternoon, and thank you for joining us. If you have any questions afterwards, as Jason said, we'll be sending an email out to our members, and we'll be able to provide more information there. So that's all. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great afternoon.